what people don't understand is like how underrepresented communities of color are often in polls and so on and so forth. So I want to start off with a first question to kind of just start off of a basis of race, which is the reality of all this. Why does color matter, right? Like, why is it important to me as a Hispanic to have a person of color or a Hispanic representing me? Or why is it important to, you know, anyone who's a person of color to have someone that looks like them represent them? So, Jamira, do you want to answer first? I know that obviously you're involved in the political realm to a pretty major extent locally in Philadelphia. So why is that important to you?
So I want to take it a step further and would say that diversity inclusion is important for me in regards to Congress or any member of office, because I feel like America is a melting pot or a mixing pot, whatever you want to call it. And we are diverse not only in culture and race, but also in age. And so if we don't have a Congress that is very representative of the people in which they represent, how can we then make sure that those issues are a part of the larger conversation and the policies that are being created in Congress? So not only is Cory Booker one of a very small number of people of color to enter into Congress, he is also one of the youngest members to enter into Congress. And I think if we're really going to have this conversation about diversity, we also need to make sure that we're talking about age too, because young people, particularly young people under the age of 25, represent more than 40% of the population. So how can we make sure that is included as well?
And I think Cory Booker's, I didn't know he was one of the youngest. The dude ain't young. Like,
he's young compared to the average number of members of Congress.
That's what I'm saying. That's wild, because he's not young. He's one of the youngest. But just like when well, I guess President Obama was kind of young compared to all the other presidents and stuff, and super young compared to all the other presidents. But I think, just to answer Dan's question, like, why does color matter, and to go even further to talk about like age, I think color matters because experiences matter. Socioeconomic statuses matter because those experiences matter. And if you don't know those experiences, how am I supposed to represent your experience in when it comes to writing laws? And voting on laws, when you talk about Washington politics and national politics. So if our political representation, if my member of Congress doesn't come from the same neighborhood that I came from, doesn't come from the same socioeconomic background that I came from, or the same culture that I came from, they won't know how to advocate for my culture when it comes to writing laws and advocating for my experience. But I think. But I think for so many times, I mean, let's talk about some of the different stats. When you talk about minority communities in Congress, there's 2 Native Americans, there's 10 Asians, 9 in Congress, 1 in the Senate. Indians, there's 1, 3 in history, and you look at like American Indians, they're the highest income group for minorities, but there's 1 in Congress. 30 Latinos in Congress, 43 Blacks in Congress.
Which makes up 86 out of 450 seats.
86
members of Congress out of 450 seats. And just to go back to the age, the average age for members of the House is 55, and the average age for members of the Senate is 60. So yes, Cory Booker is one of the youngest.
And the average age, so could somebody, if we don't have that stat up, what about the average age of Americans? What's the average age of Americans?
Let's see.
Because we know that the average age of the world is about, 25, 26 years old?
Mm-hmm.
The average age of Americans.
So it's interesting, but it's interesting in a sense. So I see those stats, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I get it now. I get why, like, we don't really why Americans don't connect with Congress members or Senate members, because they're not us. So how can they connect with us? So so my question is, like, what do we expect? Looking at those statistics, do we really expect them to advocate for us?
Yeah, I think there's also been this really big push on communities of color in regards to allyship. And like, I get it. I'm totally down for having allies as someone who's an immigrant, as someone who's LGBT, and also a person of color. Like, I get this idea of building power through allies, but there is a point to me where, like, allies still, like Jordan said, are not going to get it in the same way, right? Like people of color have, and of course people of color also have diverse backgrounds, right? Like Jordan said, come from my community, come from my economic background. Like there's different factors to all of this. It's not just saying that because someone's Latino, they're going to like represent me. Because for example, I'm from Florida, and Marco Rubio definitely doesn't represent who I am in the communities I come from.